Hi guys, it's Barry in DR. I'm extremely pleased to have as my guest Gonzalo Lira. Gonzalo is internationally recognized as a filmmaker, novelist, and venture capitalist. Gonzalo is an accomplished and much sought out expert in understanding the world's various economies and how they are all interconnected. Gonzalo's grasp of comprehending how the world economies function in a cylindrical fashion rather than a linear format is second to none. Perhaps this is why he represents some of the highest net worth individuals around the globe, as well as regularly consulting for hedge funds and private banks. Growing up in Chile under the Pinochet dictatorship provides Gonzalo with a clear understanding of the misconceptions out there and perhaps why a number of these countries just might be your best option when that bump in the night impacts most first world nations. Being the chief editor of gonzalolira.blogspot.com and president of Gonzalo Lira's strategic planning group keeps him on the cutting edge in a fast-changing world of protecting your assets and providing flexibility in what perhaps should be your family's plan B for surviving the upcoming events. Welcome, Gonzalo. It's a pleasure to have you as our guest.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure as well.
Gonzalo, if you're ready, let's move into our first question.
Shoot, fire away.
I've recently discovered both your blog and your website. Immediately, I was impressed by the amount of on-the-ground experience you have. Having lived in these countries for over 3 decades, I find it refreshing to be interviewing someone who truly understands the many misconceptions out there when it comes to third world countries. Would you expand on this from your points of view and explain if you are experiencing similar misinformation?
Yeah, certainly. What happens is that a lot of Americans especially, as well as Europeans, tend to have this notion that everything in South America is basically the same as Tijuana and the bad parts of Tijuana at that. But of course, as you know, the range of experience in Central and South America and the Caribbean are enormous. I mean, you have great poverty like Tijuana, for instance, but you have extremely cosmopolitan cities and extremely safe cities like Santiago, like Lima in Peru, like, Buenos Aires. You tend to get pickpocketed, but it's a wonderful city, and it has a lot of upside to it. And there's this notion that civil society does not exist outside the United States and Europe, and that's a mistake. And that makes people not understand that there's a lot of places where they can move to and change their addresses and find places that suit them. And there are places that are safe, that are dependable, that have very solid societies, civil societies, places where you can make a life for yourself that are just, extraordinarily agreeable and pleasant, and that don't have a lot of the problems that you have in the United States currently, which we all know about.
Mention a little bit about actually what your view is on the actual quality of life, and not realizing that governments in these countries, are actually less restrictive than people that are living in many first world nations.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed, for instance, in Chile, the police here in Chile are very famous. They're called Carabineros. It's a national police force, and if you come here, they're dressed in a olive green uniform. And the Carabineros here, their entire rationale is, and the way they are trained is, they are trained to diffuse confrontation. They are trained to bring down the level of a situation, the emotional level of a situation. Unlike American police. I mean, I've lived in California, in New York, in Florida, in New Hampshire, and except in New Hampshire, all of the American police force that I've ever had to deal with have always been very confrontational, very bullying, very, I'm here, so step aside, and very aggressive towards the citizenry. And they tend to look at American citizens as the threat. Now, if you look at me, the way I'm dressed usually is I'm dressed in a button-down shirt, a sports jacket, jeans, and, nice leather shoes. I don't look like any kind of a gangbanger, and as you hear me, I don't speak like a gangbanger or some, particularly dangerous individual. And yet, often as not, whenever I'm dealing with a policeman in the United States, I feel afraid. I feel as if he's trying to get me or hurt me in some way. And he's looking for an excuse to arrest me. And this has happened to me several times. I've never been arrested. I've never been in any kind of trouble with the law, and yet I'm frightened by the police in the United States, whereas here in Chile, I certainly am not. Here in Chile, you feel that the police are out to maintain public order and a calm environment. And I've been in various situations with police here in Chile, and their whole rationale is just to soothe everybody's mood and tension, bring things down. Now, that's just one example. I think that a lot of people in the United States don't realize the kind of environment that they're living in because it's the only environment that they know of. And so they think to themselves, oh, this is the normal. They don't realize that government intrusion into our lives is not normal. They don't realize that having a police force that drives around in these armored vehicles, which is just ridiculous, right? As if we're all like bomb-throwing guerrillas out in the suburbs. It's an adversarial mentality between the government and the people. And people in the United States don't seem to realize it. And when they come to a country like Chile, when they come to a country like Dominican Republic, when they go to other places in the world, they realize that the government is not the adversary of the people. But that's the feeling you get in the United States, and that's why I think a lot of people in the United States are leaving. Because it's not just that the government is trying to squeeze out every last dime from the citizens. It's also that the government in the United States seems to view the citizens as the threat that has to be controlled and dominated and crushed. And, I mean, I personally don't want to live like that. I don't live like that. I moved. And I'm able to go to the United States. I mean, just so that your listeners know, I personally can go to the United States. I have a U.S. passport. I was born in the United States. I did my university in the United States. I have friends, professional colleagues, whatever, in the U.S. And I love the U.S. I just don't want to live there because it's a miserable experience where I feel that I'm, being crushed, and I don't like it. But that's me.
Well, credible point and taken in that context, but perhaps maybe touch on one of the advantages I've learned over 34 years and why you should keep your expat credentials because, like, for example, a driver's license. For example, people here from America don't understand that they have the benefit to be able to leave at any time they want from a country like this, and the government looks at it with that in mind, that they're not draining the economy, they're helping the economy. So when you show, if you're pulled over, first of all, at least around Cabrera, you can have a cop hold your beer while you're looking for your license, and I'm not kidding. And once you show him a Canadian or American driver's license, he's just going to tell you, señor, un poco más cuidado, a little more caution, and going to give you back your license and tell you to have a good day because they know that you can leave anytime you want and you're actually helping the GDP. You're not hurting it. Can you touch on that?
Sure. There are countries like that in the Caribbean, like Dominican Republic, that they take a very pro-foreigner point of view. And in point of fact, most countries around the world, I've been in Eastern Europe, I've been in Western Europe, I've been in Latin America, all throughout Latin America, and people view American people, American individuals very positively. It's the propaganda in the U.S. that gives this notion that outside of the United States you're in danger, you can be targeted. This weird paranoia, which I think is just very destructive because this paranoia is, it seems to me, fomented, encouraged by the mainstream media. They seem to want to give the idea to everybody in the United States and Canada that any place outside of North America, you will be shot instantly or blown up by some, improvised explosive device or something like that, which is, of course, ridiculous. I've been in some shady places in Eastern Europe, for instance, and the people are as nice as can be. I mean, like poor areas, they are as nice as can be, and if you explain that you're an American or that you're a foreigner, they are so polite, so pleasant. They're like, oh, go over there, and a lot of them will tell you, oh, don't go over there, that's the bad area of town. And they themselves will help you out and steer you clear because you have to keep in mind, it's like when you are invited to somebody else's house, when you go to somebody else's house, they always want to show their home in the best possible light. And the same thing happens with foreign countries. When you go to a foreign country and you don't pretend to be a native and you don't act like a jerk, I mean, you act like a sensible person and humble and act like you are a guest in somebody else's country, not that you own the country. Well, they tend to treat you very nicely. I think that one of the big mistakes is some Americans, a minority, thankfully, some Americans and Canadians, when they go overseas, they look down at the country that they're visiting. And I think that that's a huge mistake. You should always be humble and grateful for being wherever you are. You are a guest in somebody else's country. If you act that way, that you are a guest, and you don't look down on their customs, you don't look down on how they do things. Maybe later, after a long time, and you know the system really well, you understand something, you realize, God, this is really inefficient. They shouldn't be doing things like that. But only after you know something really well. You shouldn't just automatically say, oh, it's not like America, so it sucks. That's a huge mistake, and I've seen that with a lot of Americans, and it's sad.
Yeah, it's a bit of closed-mindedness, but for the most part, they are excellent people. But one of the things, speaking specifically of the Dominican Republic, one of the things I find almost no Americans are aware of is the tremendous respect, because in '64 and '65, the Dominican Republic asked America to come and get involved, and they prevented a dictatorship that if America did not step in, the Dominican Republic would be living under much the same regime as Castro's Cuba. So there's actually a tremendous amount of respect for American people, providing they don't try to change it into their country, because they don't want it that way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the things that I do at LiraSPG is I try to help people understand that when you leave America, when you make the decision that it is just economically to your benefit and it is economically and personally to your benefit to leave the United States, that you should look for a country that suits you. Now, there is no one Garden of Eden. I mean, if there was a Garden of Eden, we'd all go there, obviously. But expatriates who decide to leave the United States, who consciously decide, America is just not the country I grew up in, I just don't want to live here anymore because it's just too sad to see it decay. Well, you have to start looking around and see the different countries and find what's good for you, not what somebody else is telling you. Because you and I can talk about Dominican Republic or Chile, because for you, Dominican Republic is great, and for me, Chile is great. But every country has its pros and cons. One of the things I love about Chile, for instance, is that I love to be able to go drive 45 minutes and I'm skiing, and then drive 90 minutes and I'm at the beach. That's the thing that I love about Chile. Some other people, they don't care about that. They care about other things. They care about, great restaurants, and so they should go to Buenos Aires. Buenos Aires has fantastic restaurants, and I'm just trying to make it clear that everybody has to find out their own paradise, their own Garden of Eden. And the way to do that is to prioritize. And at LiraSPG, that's what we try to do, is to help our members prioritize what is important for them. And based on these priorities, arrive at a decision as to which is the best country for them. Because every country is different. Every country has its benefits. Everything has its pros and cons. And the thing that you must remember, as you said in your question or your statement, your last comment was, people outside the U.S., they like Americans. It's not that they like Americans. They like foreign people. They like different people. They want to meet different people from different backgrounds. When I was, for instance, in Ukraine last year, people loved talking to me about Chile because for them it was so exotic. They didn't want to hear me talk about the United States because they had plenty of American friends that they'd already met. They were interested in Chile because for them it was just so exotic and so different and stuff like that. And then when I showed them pictures of Santiago with, big modern glass buildings and all the rest of it, they were like, oh, that's a little disappointing because they thought it was a lot more exotic. But, my point, everything, when you look around the world, there are so many places to go to, and there's so much fun. And that's the thing that I think that you and I both agree on, is that we look around and we are trying to have fun, not feel miserable about where we're going, right?
Absolutely. Years ago, very briefly, before we get on to the next question, years ago, my father, when I was around 14, asked me, what's going to be the costliest thing you ever own? And everybody who's ever asked that particular question to would be education, house, raising children. My father said, it's a closed mind. It'll cost you everything.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's very interesting to see that, because I find prejudice and hatred is an equal opportunity employer.
Yeah.
And it's not so much that they hate a country as they hate an individual's attitude who happens to
Yeah.
live in a particular country.
Yeah.
Gonzalo, I was recently listening to one of your interviews with Max Kaiser. I couldn't help but notice that you mentioned more than once it's already time to take the gap and expatriate from America. Please share with our viewers some of your reasons why, and is it only America, or does the same hold true for some other countries as well?
For me, it's the United States, because the United States, as I said, I've lived in multiple countries in multiple continents, and the United States is the most attractive in many ways, but the cons of living in the United States have far outweighed the pros, and it doesn't seem to me that in the future things are going to get any better. Let me be specific. It seems that the government of the United States is hell-bent on creating a police state where the police forces essentially occupy the city you live in, the suburb you live in, the town you live in, and they view you as a threat. The government is hell-bent on squeezing every last dime out of you, one way or the other, and spending it on the crony capitalists. You have to keep in mind something. If the United States were a foreign country, the New York Times, the Washington Post would refer to the United States as an oligarchy, no different from Russia. You know, in Russia, you have all these oligarchs, these very rich men who control the whole country. In the United States, you have very rich people, very rich and powerful corporations and lobbying groups that control the country. And they control it for their benefit. And the people of the United States are essentially the sacrificial lambs for these corporations, for these oligarchs. I mean, the United States is an oligarchy no matter how you look at it. The rich get what they want. And if you stand on principle in the United States, you're going to get run over. So for me, the decision happened quite a while ago that it's no longer worthwhile to live in the United States. Recently, there was a study by a professor from Princeton that analyzed the laws that the Congress has passed in the last decade or so. And it turns out that when most of the people want something, but the rich oligarchs don't want it, it doesn't happen. And when most of the oligarchs, the rich people, the rich corporations, the ones with the big lobbying groups, when they want something that the people don't want, it doesn't matter what if the people don't want it, it becomes the law, and it's signed into law. So that means that the United States, objectively, studied by these guys at Princeton, I mean, Princeton University is world class, right?
Absolutely.
These guys at Princeton have concluded, have proven that the United States is ruled by rich people. I mean, I'm not talking rich people that have a couple of $1 million. I'm talking, billions. These billionaires and these lobbying arms of these industries and these specific groups get what they want, and you as a citizen, no matter what you want, no matter if you are the majority, if you are more than 50% of the population that wants something, if the rich people in America don't want it, the mega rich, the corporations, the lobbyists, you're not going to get it. So why live in such a country? Because that's not a democracy. Last I checked, that's an oligarchy. And I don't want to live in a place like that.
No, absolutely. As a matter of fact, about a month and a half ago, we relocated a family of 5 here from England, and the information coming out of them was astounding, as well as what I don't understand is the sit back and wait attitude, like it can't happen to me, when already, if you, for example, take countries like Spain, Italy, Cyprus, already the money's locked down.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much too late for these people. And I don't understand the lackadaisical attitude as if it will not happen to me. I mean, people speak about, for example, even currency. They don't do their research. They don't understand that the American currency has already been changed 4 times in such a brief history. You have the greenback, the continental, on and on. They're all distinct. They're dead. But yet, oh no, it can never happen to us. And I don't.
You know what I think, Barry? What it is? It's the same thing that happened to Jewish people in Germany during the 1930s. They saw these things, Kristallnacht, all the rest of it, all these, purity laws and Aryan laws and what have you that the Nazis implemented, right? And they were hardworking people. They had their nice house, their nice place, and they thought, it won't get that bad. It's just a little bit. And of course, what happened was that it got worse and worse and worse, and then finally it was too late to leave. Now, this is a horrible comparison, but it's true. It's the frog in the boiling water kind of thing. When you drop a frog into cold water and slowly turn up the heat, that frog will not jump out of the pot. It'll stay in that pot until it boils to death. That's the problem people have. They think that, it can't happen here. It'll get better. It's just for the time being. It's just this war on terror thing. It's just this financial crisis thing. Soon enough, when things are better, when things aren't so bad, everything will be better and it'll calm down. And that's not going to happen.
No, I'm afraid you're correct, but just a sidebar here on that. Whenever people ask me what I am in terms, I always say I was born a human being and labeled everything else. But to touch on that, maybe this is what is my desire to do such an amount of work with DRescapes and helping people. You don't know this since we just met each other. Literally, except for my grandfather and grandmother, just under 200 of my family was annihilated in Romania and Poland. And
that's horrible. I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't mean to be.
No. That if anything, that inspires me, because I remember my grandfather when I was 4 and 5 years old telling me stories. And sorry if you hear our rooster in the background, but we're very self-sufficient here. But anyway, I remember him distinctively saying that was the only time he said to Bubby, grandmother, that I'm leaving you if you don't come with me. He said, I don't understand what it is. I don't want to understand what it is, but something's happening. And precisely what you just said, Gonzalo, I remember it like it was yesterday. All the brothers, uncles, cousins, aunts were all saying, you're crazy. These are people that have dinner with us. It's never going to happen. It's only the economy. Well, they picked up and they left about 4 months before the gong went down, and they boarded a steamship and ended up in Montreal, Canada through the St. Lawrence Seaway. And I remember him telling me I had 1 pair of pants and 2 shirts, and Bubby had 1 skirt and 3 pairs of nylons and 2 blouses, 2 frying pans, and about $28 in Canadian money. Mm-hmm. But they're the only ones that survived. So it's just an interesting thing that you would have used that.